All right, we're back. It is COMP229, Advanced Web Application Development. It's the fall 2016 semester at Centennial, and we are week 9, part 2 of our broadcast. We just finished talking about 2 and lab 3 and a bit of your final project preview as we come closer to the final project, which I'll probably reveal to you in a couple weeks, like I said. Entirety. I'll probably talk about it again next week, just because I want to keep talking about it so you guys have in your mind that you're doing a project and it's not just one thing. All right, one thing we should talk about though today is really about stuff that I want to discuss today, which is all around views. And I put a little PowerPoint that's up online as well as content. Notice that there's a project content link. That link I'm going to use today to build a new project, right? So I'm going to call it MVC Music Store today, right? So last week I called it 9 or less than 8, I think I called it. But I'm going to probably call it MVC Music Store or something like that. Okay. Maybe not. Maybe I'll call it less than 9. I don't know. Building an MVC Music Store from scratch again. And I also want to show you how to do a database with EF framework and link and all the same kind of stuff we talked about last week, right? We're going to do it again, so you've seen it yet again with MVC, because it's important you guys to see it a couple times so that you're like, hey, he did this way last time, and now he did it the other way. What's the advantage or disadvantage? But let's talk about views for a second. And I got this little PowerPoint that I want to kind of go over with you. And it's all around MVC views and what they are. Confusing. MVC can be confusing to people because they look at it and it's 3 big letters, M, V, and C, and they're like, what are that? What is that? I don't get it. Understand what the controller is and what the view is and what the model is. Again, as an overview and to summarize or review what we did last week, simply the rendered page. So your final rendered page, if I request a page from the server, right? I send a request to the server with a view. And it's going to go through the controller to respond to the view and to render the view. Sometimes you won't have a model because there's no data. If you're making an MVC website with, I don't know why you would do that, on the back end, right? Some kind of back end data for almost any web server, any website you built, and then it's going to go through your controller. The controller is the logic, describes how the page is going to work, and then finally your page is going to be rendered. So last week we talked about controllers and what kind of a little bit of logic behind controllers, views, and a little bit about controllers again, right? And we're also going to do that sample site. So here's MVC views for you. We talk about these things. What are views? The conventions around them. What are view models? Can we use them? Do they help? Kind of review that again this week, like we did last week. How do we use Razor, which is what I want to really focus some time today. Razor, which is the view engine. That's what it's called, the view engine, right? And how to specify a partial view if I want to do that. What's a partial view? Is it like a partial web page? So again, I want you to think about this where a MVC is a little different than ASP.NET web forms, okay? It's not file-based, right? Think about it when you break your logic into your controller, that the controller and the model are 2 classes, just like we'd use in C#, as a bit of the brains behind how your website works, okay? C# and we don't have to use something like JavaScript or PHP or something else on the back end, right? Structure for people who like that kind of thing. Java, C# was kind of like an offshoot of Java in some ways, right? Java came first, maybe. Microsoft's answer to Java, C#, right? It can also be used in the back end as well. So really, when we talk about views, views are going to be quote unquote rendered or drawn through the controller, right? Okay. And I kind of talked about this at length last week. Simple view, and if you look it up online when you look at your PowerPoint, I'm going to bring this a little closer so you can see it here so you can understand what I'm talking about. Here's a view, right? Wow, it looks like a web page because that's what it is, right? But it's only a fragment of the web page. It's not, notice that there's no header, like last week. This is just review. There's no header and there's no footer. There's no body tag, right? Because all that is contained where? Where is the header, the head, and the body tag contained in MVC? Where do I have that information? Because remember, if web page has a doc type, it has an HTML tag, it has a head tag with a section for the head that's inside the head, it has a body tag, and the body tag has all the details, right? So where is that structure contained? Where? What's it called? And just to give you a hint, in web forms it was called master pages in MVC. This is like, if I was going to give you a little quiz, you guys would die today, right? Because it sounds like you guys don't know where they are. What are they called? Layouts is what they're called, right? Layouts. CSS, it's called layouts. So the layout pages, right? They're like master pages, and they contain all that extra information. They contain the HTML tag, the head tag with all the details in the title tag, all that stuff. Plus, they also include the bottom portion of the page, right, which is your body tag, the body closing tag, as well as your closing HTML tag, and so on. All those other tags in the top and the bottom. Most likely, most often, a common navigation system is also included in your layout. All right, because you don't want that same navigation to be the same across multiple pages, right? It's a similar look and feel for your pages, as opposed to every page looks different. That doesn't make any sense, right? Unless kinds of pages, and so you can have different layouts, okay, if you really want to. But really, that's what a view looks like. If you look at it, right, I mean, a fragment of a web page. If I take that fragment of the web page plus my layout together on the back end in the server, they will produce a full web page, and that's the page that we see after a request a page through a URL with web forms. Now, notice at the top here, there is no directive like we had in web forms. In web forms, we had a directive, right? At symbol, you can't see it of this page. You have a little at symbol with these little curly braces, and that's razor. We're using razor syntax, title property called home page, a string property obviously, to this view bag. And view bag is just a container object. That's what we had talked about before, a dynamic container dictionary. That's what it is. Where title is the key, is the value. So a key value pairs dictionary. But it doesn't really have a type. So it's not typeless, it's dynamic. Causes some people who are very structured concern, because they sit there and go like, why am I using dynamic typing in C# where I have complete control of my data types? I don't understand. It's a way of fixing problems. That's what we use it for. For simple data transfer between pages, view bag. Other ways of doing it today too. All right, so that's really what a view is, just to clarify, right? Okay, again, we're using a templating engine or a view engine. That's what it's called. And we're using view bag to carry basic, simple information from the controller, or even right in here, when we create a view bag, right? We can do it here. This is the controller. And remember what this is called. In the controller, it was called an action result method. Action method. And the action method, each action method in the controller relates to a view. So the controller itself has a bunch of methods. The controller is just a class with a bunch of methods inside, and each method relates to a view. View is a fragment of a web page that you're going to smash together with the layout to create your final rendered page. That's what it is. Okay, let's review this stuff, because it's far easier to show you than to tell you. Go into Visual Studio. I'm pulling up Visual Studio 2015, and we're going to kick off a new project. You know what I was thinking? Let's call it Lesson 9 again. All right, so instead of Lesson 8, we did last week. We'll do lesson 9 this week, and then hopefully it won't try and reset my or update my Windows, during our class again. They did during class. That was fantastic, right? But anyways, somehow I working nowadays. I don't even understand, right? I didn't ask for Cortana, but it comes with Windows 10. So let's take a look. It's like Siri, but I don't know. I like Siri better. Okay, I'm not saying that because I'm a Mac person. Truly, I think Cortana has a long way to go, right? Okay, so here's we're going to make a new project, right? Now, what did I do last week? I made it so that I could do this, right? How did I do that? I made a template, if you remember. So I don't have to do all that work again. And if I go all the way down to COMP229, I have an MVC. That's what I'm going to start with. From scratch and download, Bootstrap and Font Awesome and everything else. It's already done for me. Here in my COMP229 template, what I made. And then we can expand this later on. But for now, this is going to be called, I'm going to use this one. It's going to be called lesson. Okay, and I'm also going to put it in the right place. It's not going to go in Comp 1004, the course I'm doing. It's going to go into COMP229. There it is. Create a new Git repository for it. And I'm going to create this directory for my solution. Now, when you create a directory for your solution, what it does is it creates an envelope for your solution or for your project, box that your project goes inside of. Be careful here. When you put things on Azure, remember that it's smart enough to understand what you're doing. This stuff on another website, it will fail, like another web provider. For you to use ASP.NET, any service, web forms, or has to be on a compatible Windows server. It cannot be on some other server, like a Node server or a PHP server or something else. It has to be on a Windows server. Press OK. All right, we're going to bring up, when you say OK, it's going to ask you, OK, what kind of project do you want to create, Tom? Well, normally. But now that we have a template, it's going to just load that template that we created last week. And for those people who missed that, these videos, right? We kind of create a template, so we don't have to do all that work again, right? And that's what we're moving off of. Okay, cool. So here's my, now it says F2016 lesson 9. Do I have data? The answer is hell no. I do not have data. I don't have it right now. And if you look at my web config, right, the only connection I should have is the default connection that connects to my local DB, log in and log out, which is included in all MVC projects. Okay, so if you're not going to do your login or security or whatever you want to call it, assignment 2, right? Should I remove anything, right? And my recommendation to you is no. Just hide it. It's not going to hurt anybody if you don't go there, right? Hide it. It's much easier for you, and you're going to need it for your final project, right? If you take it out now, quite difficult. It's quite a pain, and then you know what, right? So please don't do that. Hide it, and then we can put it back. So how do I hide stuff? In my links. So if I was going to make a nav bar without any security, then I would just not include it in my nav bar. It wouldn't be included in navigation. It's even there, right? You can also disable it, but that's much more complex. Okay, so now that I've got the structure of my website, what we're doing is build. And we're going to run it just here in Chrome, right? So let's see what we get. It's going to download the latest version of NuGet, and then it's going to run a small little server, Express, locally, which is installed with Visual Studio 2015, any version, Enterprise, Community Edition, Professional. It's all installed with that. What do we get here? What do we get with my little template that I made? This, right? Which is just my application name and stuff like this. If this is the same template, I've just updated a couple of things, so I don't have to do all that work again. Okay, good. So now that we've built and run it, right? Now we can start customizing. And the first thing I want to do here today is I want to include this GitHub. So I'm going to go to Sync. I'm going to go to GitHub. If you have Visual Studio 2015 update 3 and your GitHub extension. You should see this link here. It's nice and easy. Click Get Started. And then what it's going to do is going to say, okay, you want your COMP229 F2016 Lesson 9, and where do I want it? On Centennial. This is the organization that I want. And if you only have one organization, that's the only one that'll appear here. I have multiple ones. Publish. Then what it's going to do is going to take your files and publish them to GitHub. If there's any changes, they'll be listed here. There's none, right? So now I've got my repo on GitHub. You can watch changes as we move today. Do it. Okay, last day, we had a SQL server that I set up. And I want to do the same thing today as a refresher so you guys can see it again. Do that. I'm going to do it locally again because we have trouble connecting remotely. But it's really quite simple, and I will show you guys how to do it remotely. Machine in front of me up there, as opposed to doing it here, which is quite difficult actually because there's no microphone, so I can't talk. Okay, so how do I do it? So I have SQL Server Object Explorer here, right? And I want to make a connection to it. Notice I have a local DB already from last time. MySQL local DB, the local database that is the local database server that is running in the background here with Visual Studio 2015 Enterprise Edition Update 3 and any other version. SQL Server Express, right? SQL Server Express is the database server. It's like a little mini server, just like IIS, Internet Information Services, is also running in the background when we run our site. It happens. And SQL Server Express is running as a service in Windows, right? So you don't have to do anything. It's just there, right? If you've installed Visual Studio. On the downside, notice I have two of them. I have this one and I have this one. You might have this one too. This is from a previous version of Visual Studio. I have both running at the same time. This can slow your system down considerably. For me, but I want to go into this one, MS SQL Local DB. And if I expand this thing, and again, I'm looking at SQL Server Object Explorer, and the way I got that was, if you don't have that available, is View, Server Object Explorer should appear here, Control plus the backslash, and then Control plus S, right? And I created a database here, COMP229, right? That's what our course is called, right? That's the database, right? Just for demo purposes today, I'm going to call this, I'm going to make a new one so you can see it. I'm going to call it MVC Music Store, okay? So that's how we do that. So we're going to right-click on Databases, and I'm going to call this MVC Music Store, all right? That's what the database is going to be called. This is on our local DB. If I press OK, it creates it. Now, I just created MVC Music Store is empty. It's empty. There's nothing there. It's just MVC Music Store. For me to put something in there, I want to script, right? That's how we did it last time. Now, there's going to be another way we can do it as well. But for this time, the script. Now, I included the script with you up on eCentennial last week. And it looks like MVC Music Store -create SQL, SQL, right? This script is what we want to run. It can create all the database tables for us. So we have some data to play with. That's what it's for, right? So I'm going to right-click, and I'm going to edit it. Here's the script. I'm doing this on purpose like this so I can see the script. This is the T-SQL commands, right? These are all the SQL commands to create all my data, as you can see. Data into the table, right? And there's a lot of data that it adds in. Take a look, lots and lots, right? Like a bunch of values. Highlight all this by Control-A to select all, Control-C to copy, and if you're really nervous about that, you can always go copy, right? Back into Windows, and I'm going to scroll down to where it says MVC Music Store, right-click, and go query, right? A new query is a set of commands that I'm going to make, right? So here's my new SQL query. Again, I right-clicked on on the database, which is empty. Okay, now that I've got that, I'm going to paste. Remember, I copied all this stuff. I'm going to paste it in here. Control V, right? Now, what this does, is, if you notice, is it's going to alter the tables. First, create the tables. That's what it's going to do, right? If I go to the top, it's going to say use MVC Music Store. That's what it's going to do. Then I'm going to go alter the tables, right? I'm going to drop constraints and so on. It's going to do all this kind of stuff, create the tables for me, and then add the data. Now, the only way I can run that is if you notice on the left, there's a little button. It looks like a play button. It'll execute the script. If I click onto it, right, it'll execute. And if it says it, if it can't do it, right, don't worry about that. Now, let's take a look and see what it did. I just executed the script right away, right? I didn't do this. This parses the script to check to see if it's okay. All right, let's take a look at my tables. Did I add any tables? Yes, it did. It added the album table, the cart, which we're going to get to later on. When you do your shopping cart, it's going to look like this. Your order and your order details are going to have be temporary, and your order and order details eventually is going to be where you're going to store the final order, right? Have a seat. We'll talk on the break. If you have time to stick around, or you have to go? Okay, stick around for a bit. It's okay. We'll talk on Saturday. It's up to you. All right. Sorry about that. So you've got this table here that's going on. This is what's been created for us, right? Now this is all up on the server, right? So on the server, right? Now it's called localDB. It's just an alias for accessing the local server without using an IP address. That's what it is, right? So this localDB, MS SQL localDB, this thing here, of an alias for the server. Okay, now that I've got this MVC Music Store, I want to create my connections. Okay, so I'm going to clear this thing. I don't care about this anymore. Solution Explorer. Now I have my models folder, and this is where I want to have all my connection logic. Is right in here. I want to be able to connect database. My database is this. I want to keep this open because remember last time, right? I want to do this so I can see what the connection string is going to be like. My models connect to my database with Entity Framework. Right click on my models, add. And I'm going to go to New Item. Bring up the New Item dialog box, which is right here. On the left, there is data, which is the thing that's going to tell us to connect, right? There's a bunch of different options. The one you want is the top one, which is ADO.NET Entity Data Model. It gives you a default name as model. We want to change this to MVC Music Store Context. MVC Music Store, right? You can also, some people call it MVC Music Store Model. That's okay, right? But I don't like using model in the models folder. I call it context. Some people also call it MVC Music Store Entities, right? Because they look at, it's the entity data model, right? We're not going to do that. Add. Notice that there's some options. Which one should I use? We talked about this in the first part of the course. Which one? Code first from database, right? Not this one. Empty code first means like there's no data, and we're going to make our models ourselves, right? And we're going to take the models and create the database. That would be bad because we have data already from database. Then click next. Okay. Connection string. Do I have a connection string here? I do not, right? I have COMP229, but I don't have the one I want. So let's make it. I'm just going about this like as if I don't have a connection string, okay? It's going to pull up a connection string or a connection window in a second. Also see it like this. If you, for the first time, it'll come up like this. For example, if I wanted to connect to a database file, I would use this one. To a database file here. I don't have a database file. I have this, a database, a local server that I'm connecting to. If you're connecting with Azure, it will be this one, this option. Now, my local database, because it's local, my authentication type is going to be Windows authentication because I'm connecting without any kind of username and password. Azure, I couldn't use this authentication type. I'd have to use SQL Server authentication with a username and password, which you define on Azure in your SQL Server setup. That. Just reviewing for people who don't know. Okay, let's go back to Windows authentication. I need to put it in. Please do not pull this down. This will cause you all kinds of headache. All right, so let's put it in. What is it? It's right here, right? Let's type it in. DB, and then backslash MS SQL, right? DB, just like the way it is right here. It's exactly the same. You don't have to change anything. Now, some people will be tempted to click this button, test. Put down, pull this thing down here. And if it works, you'll see a long list of stuff that's connected to my database server. We want the one that says MVC Music Store. That's the one we want. That's the new database we made. It's going to look like this. Okay, cool. We have our MVC Music Store. Okay, now. And when I do that, it's going to give me a connection string. It's going to say data source equal to local DB, MS SQL DB, local DB. Catalog is MVC Music Store. Security is true, which means I'm going to use Windows authentication, right? Results sets is true, and so I can have multiple people accessing at the same time. And my app type is the entity framework. Okay. Now this is incorrect. MVC Music Store context. We want to change this to MVC Music Store because we're making a connection to the database. Now we're going to have two connections. One security and one for our MVC Music Store. Okay. Let's click next. Now that we've renamed the connection. If everything goes well, you should see a list of all the tables. I don't need all of them for now. I'm going to add them all in later, and I can create another connection if I need to later on. I need album, I need artist, and I need genre. Those three things, just like we did last time. Again, this is just a review. Notice this out downstairs, down here, it says pluralize or singularize generated object names. It's just going to take this album and make it albums, artists, genres, right? Click finish. Now, if everything goes well, it's going to connect to our local DB, our music store context section. This is what it is right here, automagically, right? And if you notice over here, inside of our music store context.cs file, created inside of our models folder, automatically, right? You see that there is a DB set album. So DB set is a set, right, of type album. So a list of album type and a list of artist called artists. Artist is the type. Anything in these angle brackets it denotes a type. And why can these be data types? Because our album, our artist, and our genre all classes, and we're creating objects of those type. Okay? So that's what this thing is. Now let's take a look at album, which is what we did last time. In our album class, we have a table. Data that we see here, right, are just properties inside of a class. So album ID is a property, genre ID is a property. Which one do you think are the foreign keys, right? Well, there's genre ID and artist ID, and this is the album class. Must be these two are foreign keys. You also, and when you create your own foreign keys, and this is for future for you guys, if you're going to make something, for example, with your store, you might have your restaurant, whatever the fantasy restaurant database is going to be. And then your table, right, is going to be, I don't know, food items table, right? Or it could be your menu table, whatever you like to call it, right? Menu might not be the right name. It might be food items. For example, food item ID, right? Food item name. It flows better, right? Food item description. Food item image. Food item long description. Food item and not a long description. and food item, right, cost. Things would be inside your table. That's what we would make. Database side, right, and add some sample food items manually, like I showed you before, how to add sample food items, connect with Entity Framework to create this class for you. You don't want to do this from scratch. Okay, well, you could, but why? Of course you could. All right, so album, artist, genre. These are the three things that we just created. They're just classes. That's all models are. Now that we have our model, we can create our controllers. How do I do that? Hina, what do I do? Class. Okay, good. And then add what? Controller, right? Okay, good. So I'm gonna add a controller. We're gonna add our controllers now, just like we did before. Okay. Now, for today's lesson, what I want to do, instead of adding all that controller stuff that we did before, normally I could scaffold everything out. I can go MVC controller with views using Entity Framework. That's what we want to use, right? I could make it using no framework, no model at all, right? And scaffold everything manually, which is what we're going to do. We're going to scaffold everything manually, okay? So what I want to do in this particular case, because we're going to make our controller, is I want to make something called a StoreController. Not an albums controller, right? And it's not a genre controller. It's none of those. It's a StoreController. StoreController is our own custom controller backend. Okay, there is no, backend that we're connecting to. Right? Now, this a little bit, but what I think we need to connect to, right, is the genre, right? So let's try this, do this. So we're going to call StoreController the genre model, right? Hear me out when I do this, okay? So let's try this together. So I'm going to use this one. I could use empty. This one, MVC controller with views using Entity Framework, right? Click Add. Pull it up. It says, what's our model class? I want you to pick genre. But we're not going to make a genre controller. Normally it would be called, whatever the model is called is usually based on the class. Presenting me with an option of calling it genre controller. Please don't. Let's rename this thing to StoreController. For assignment number 2, right? Well, you could link to food items, but you're not going to call it food item controller, menu controller, or restaurant controller, or something else, right? You can call it whatever you like. Okay, look what it's saying. Generate views for me if I want to. Reference script libraries. I definitely want this one checked. Reference script libraries. Layout page. Yeah, I like that. That's important because we're going to make our own standard layout page, right? Layout's got to be different than what it was, right? I want to start generating our views manually. So for us, instead of making some default views, we're just going to uncheck this box for today. Any views. We're going to make our views manually because today is all about views, right? So why would I generate my views? Okay. Before, use async controller actions. What's this? Anyone have an intuition of what this could be? Wendell, what do you think this is? I don't know what this is now. Use async controller actions. What do you think it would be? Come on, take a shot. Throw it in, man. Throw it in the hoop. Come on. Async, right? Async stands for asynchronous, right? So what's the difference between synchronous and asynchronous? Synchronous means, right? Synchronous access happens when I access it, then it waits, and then you can access it. Asynchronous doesn't matter how many people access my view. It performs slightly better, but it's also more complex to build. For today, we're going to not use asynchronous actions. Later on, we're going to flip the switch on this one. All right? So for now, we're just going to say, we're not going to generate views. We're not going to use async controller actions. that says, hey, what's my data context class? We need one of those too. We're going to use MVC Music Store Context, right? It won't allow us to press the add button without this. So we need to use our MVC Music Store Context, which ties all of our genre lists and albums together, right? That's what it does. That model, it's the model for our entire database, right? It connects, it's actually a reference to our database. That's what this is, right? I then click add. Whew, I know it's a lot of talk. I gotta be a lot of talk here because the genres, try rebuilding the project. I wanted to show you this again too, because what happens, why did this do this? You might get a problem like this. How do I fix this? I need to build it because if I don't build the project, I can't do this. Build means I literally have to go build. What build solution does, it'll take care, brother. What build solution does, it'll compile, add it in, including entity framework, and all of our model classes we made will be attached to the project. If I don't build my model, the scaffolded will not be added into the project, and therefore I cannot create a controller for it. So let's do it again. So right-click on controllers. I'm going to click add. I'm going to pick MVC Music Controller with views. I don't have to, but I will. Click add. And I'm going to go to here and pick my model class as genre. This one. The MVC Music Store Context. I'm not going to generate views. I'm going to change this from genre controller to store controller. Now it's going to scaffold it out. Okay. So I haven't added views, but I'm scaffolding my, look what it does. Well, it makes my controller nice, right? It's got my index, my details, it's got a bunch of other stuff, create, again, in my controller, but I haven't scaffolded out my views, right? Maybe there's some of this that I'm going to keep and some of these I'm going to delete, right? Here's something else if you want to take a look. A store folder that's been created for me, but there's nothing inside of it. I can't expand this thing. There's nothing inside my store folder. Way with my store controller, and I attach it to a model, right? Which I did. I attached it to. Notice that it also automatically used 2016 lesson 9 models that attach this, so I have access to my models folder. That's what it did, right? I've got my index, and I got a bunch of stuff. I do need a details page. I do need an index page, but I don't need all of this. So I'm going to go here, get rid of all this stuff, up until the last method where it says dispose. We'll talk about what dispose is later on. Backspace to get rid of it. So now I only have two methods, right? I have my index action, my details action, and it gives me an example of what the details is. These little comments here are just an example of how I get to that particular link. Okay? All right, here's something I don't notice that it says my store, it's passing in something to the view. This is interesting, right? Here I'm passing in db.genres to list. Well, where am I getting this? Here's db. Look what it's done for me. It's a beautiful thing. Actually included a reference automatically to my database. I don't have to write that in. This is what I would do normally. I would go in and do this private MVC Music Store Context. Here's my DB, my database, which represents my Music Store Context. You guys have seen this all before, right? And here what I'm doing is I'm saying, hey, return db.genres to list. So take the list index. Nice. I just don't want to do it here, right? So let's get rid of all this. But I could if I wanted to. So I want to be able to list my genre. Okay, good. Next, what else do I need to do? So I've got this piece, and here's my details. I like this. Here's something that it does. This is neat to look at this thing. Question mark. What's question mark mean? Did you guys not talk about this in C#? Or had me, I talked about it in C#. What are they called? What does this question mark mean? No, you're thinking about a ternary operator. That's not what it is. What's this question mark mean? Eddie, what do you think it is? Optional. So because you didn't take C# with me, right? Whenever I have a question mark after a data type, optional. So that means I will take an optional ID in the URL, like this. Right? And I can also, if I'm smart, right, assign a default. How do I assign a default? I can use an equal sign and assign a value, like 1. So it says, look, I want an ID in my method, but it's optional. If the user doesn't put in the ID, right, I don't have to do it. I can just totally like not have it in there at all, right? However, if I do, and if I don't put it in by default, assume that it's the first one that I'm looking for. Well, this is a method, right? So what this does is says this parameter is optional. If I can have it in or I cannot. I could also make an over if I really want to with the same name and a different signature. And if I did that, then I can have multiple methods with the same name, details, right? But with a different parameter list. That challenge. We don't have to get one that returns one that takes a parameter and one that doesn't. We can just use a question mark as an optional, and we can say, well, it could take an ID if you want. We'll assign one for you, right? Okay. Here's something. If ID is equal to null, am I ever going to get this now because I put this 1? My ID is never going to be equal to null because it's going to be at least 1. So we can take this whole piece out. Here's something that it's doing. It's saying genre is equal to, right, is equal to db find this ID. Find this ID in my genre, right? If it exists, return it. There's no, so there is no 1, right? Then return nothing found, right? And then return that genre. That's nice, but we're not going to do that. Okay, we're going to change this up a little bit. So let's just remove all this stuff in the middle. Okay, for now, leave this as is, genre, in a second. In fact, let's just wipe it out for now. We're changing some of this stuff. Okay, let's add another stub just as we go in. So we're going to say, and this is what it's going to look like. We're going to get our store, whatever the store is. We can actually put it like this, store. And we're going to go to browse. Remember we did this last week. And we're going to say where our genre is equal to disco, right? Okay. So again, we're just review from last week, right? We're going to call this action method browse. And we're going to listen for, right? That's optional quotation or a question mark, right? Which is going to be called genre is equal to disco. And it says browse has an issue, right? We're going to talk about this in a second. How come this isn't working, right? And the return value of my result is a view returning. Now, why isn't this working? For genre is equal to disco. It says the type string must be a non-nullable value or to use this parameter t in the generic type or method nullable t. A value of type string cannot be used as a default parameter because there are no standard conversions to typed string. So for me to do this question mark genre, I want to do this. This works, but I can't put genre in there. I can do this right? But then if I make this an optional, right, there is no default value for string. Default genre is equal to something, like I did with int, because string is kind of a complex type. So nice idea, but this is really what I want. Okay, so we're going to go back to what I just typed in, what I just erased down here. If my genre is null, right, then what? Value, right? So let's try this. I can do this here. I can say if genre, now again, I'm just put it out there for you, is equal to null. Can I do this? And equal, double equal, right? Or do I want to say string, capital string, dot empty? I want to say this instead. This is the string class, and empty is represents the empty string, right? Which is probably a little more readable. Null. What does null mean? Nothing, right? If the genre is empty, then make the genre Disco. That's kind of what we did with this. ID is equal like a default value, but we're doing it right here. So we're just testing to see if the genre is not anything, and then we'll assign a default value. Okay, and now what I'm going to do, have this, because I have access to my models here, right? And I've created a DB over here, a DB connection here. All the models, genre, right? Albums and artists, all in one controller, the StoreController, right? I just use albums as a really quick and dirty way of making that StoreController. My album, and what I want to do in here inside of my browse, and we'll come back to index in a second, right, is I want to define an object of type genre. So I'm going to say, well, here, my genre, notice that it makes this teal color. The reason why it understands what it is because of this using statement right here. It includes the models folder inside my solution, right? If I didn't include this using statement, I wouldn't be able to see the models folder at all in this file, right? And that's why we use this using statement here. So now that I've included the models folder, I can say, hey, go to the genre class. I want to make an object of type genre in the genre class called, okay? And I want to make it of type a new genre object, right? And we're going to pass in, okay, notice this is models are genre. I don't want that. I want this. Okay, cool. If I did this auto class and I pass in genre, why isn't this working, right? Well, it says genre does not contain a constructor that only takes one argument, right? How come? Well, let's take a look. If I go here and I go here, I go into my genre. Here's my genre in here. And what do I have? Do I see a constructor from my genre that takes more than one argument? No, right? Don't worry if you don't understand, okay? I want you to think about, I'm building an, then you can tell I understand. Okay, after that. Sorry, we just had a blue screen of death for Windows 10, right? Windows 10? Okay, so here, what I'm doing is, if you notice, in my genre, I have my genre class, I have a constructor, name is the model, and what it does is it creates a new albums. That's what it's doing here when you hit the constructor, right? Okay. Well, what I want this thing to do is I want to pass in, right, the genre that I'm looking at. That's what it's going to be. So the name of the genre is the one that I want it to match. So when I pass in a thing to my genre model, right, My shutter model is just going to make, it's just going to be a constructor that's going to create this. So this we're going to have to fix. Let's leave it alone for now before we take a break. Okay? I'm going to fix this genre model thing. And what I want to do here is I want to return my genre model, right? Create an object of type genre back to my view. Here's where I'm going to return to my view. Okay. Let's fix. Okay, so the details page is going to be similar to the genre. We're going to create an album. So here's our album. Let's say album, right, is equal to new album with a capital A. I'm going to pass in again, right, which is the name of my album, and plus my ID. Okay, that's what I want to do. So what am I doing? I'm going to pass in, I'm going to create a new object of type album, the name of the album, and I'm probably going to need to make a space over here with the ID. So album 1, album 3, whatever it's going to be. And I'm going to return this thing down here, album. So whenever I return something, what I'm actually doing is I'm making a reference to the model. Remember I told you it's kind of a chicken and the egg thing, right? You can't do the controller, and you can't really do the controller without the model. All right. Let's save this so far. And one more thing we have to do when we list this up. My index. In my index page, I want to create a new list, type genre, and I'm going to call it the genre with a capital, with an S, right, is equal to a new, right, of genre type. That makes sense. Brackets for a second. Okay, I want to see what this looks like. So here's a new list of type genre, and inside my new list, I want to add a new genre, and one of them is going to be called disco. Did this before, and here's a new genre where we're going to add in jazz, as if we don't have a database. We're going to get to the database in a second. We're going to add in rock. Giving us these errors for a reason, right? These errors are happening because, again, genre does not have ability for us to take it, right? Oh, by the way, these are commas. It's a list. I'm adding to the list. I'm creating a new list called the genre list. Pass that back right into my view. And here I need a semicolon. Okay, so I've kind of made a weird little controller, right? And don't worry if you don't understand everything right now, but I want you to think about what I'm doing here. I'm accessing genre again, and here I'm accessing album. And I'm making a relation between the album and the genre. Now, I want to scaffold out my views for a second. And don't worry about I don't want you to worry about what it says right now, because we're going to get to it in a bit. But if I want to make a view, I can do it in two ways. Automatically, right? How do I scaffold my view automatically? Come on. How do I scaffold my view automatically? Last week, right? I can go to the action method index as an example and add view. It's right into the controller. So if I add a view, it's going to say what kind of view? An MVC view. Okay, and it's going to ask me what is it going to be? Empty without models, what I want, because I have a weird combination of models that I'm using. I'll click create partial view. That's not what I want to do here. I also want to use a layout page. I can do that too. I want to do is just say empty without model. Okay? Now, if I click add, it's going to create a view that looks like this. So here's my index, and here's my index. It says here, but here's what I want you to put in my view. Okay, because the view is just a partial, a fragment of a page, right? We're going to do the following. We're going to say something like this. At the top, right, using, and we're going to do the at using. I can do this. At member, it says, hey, Razor. How can you use the using statement right here like this? And I'm going to say COMP229, right? And what's the, if I press Control Space, it'll fill in the rest, right? Just like we normally do. Dot, and I want to say, hey, include models. Notice I'm not using a semicolon, right, in my view. Okay, now, I want to say at model, and I want to make an I enumerable, right, of type genre. So model is an I enumerable, a genre list. I want you to think about it as a type of list. Okay? So what this says is, hey, these two first things in the first two lines of our code, this is kind of like a directive. It's saying, hey, include. And now what I want to say is the model that I want to include with my page is of type genre, right? And it's a list of type genre. An I enumerable is a list. In here, instead of an H2 tag that says index, we're going to change it to an H3. As we sit there, we're going to say browse, so a different genre. And in here, we're going to say there's a paragraph tag. In our paragraph tag, we're going to have from, and then at model with a capital D, a capital M, dot count. We'll talk about this in a second. What is it saying? Lowercase at model. And what does this uppercase at model mean? Lowercase at model refers to the model that I'm getting from the controller. So the data that I'm getting from the controller, that's what that model I enumerable is, defining what my model is. And when I use my capital M model, now I'm referring to that data object, which is a genre. The count is a property or a method of a list type, right? Model, how many items are in my model, right? That's what's going to list here. And I can put in select from 20 genre or 8 genre or 10 genre. I can say that many genre, and it'll actually interpose or genre. It'll put a number in here of how many genre I'm selecting from. Now I want to make an unordered list. I use, and I'm going to put an at for each. This is something interesting, and it's going to be of type genre. Item in my model, I want to loop. This is interesting, right? Right? For every item in my model, and I got to put in Tom. In model of type genre. So for every genre in genres, that's what this is really doing. I want you to loop item. And this is where I'm going to do an HTML.action link. And I'm going to go with item name. And I'll say browse as the link. New genre that equals to item.name. Big leap we just took. Okay, and let's talk about what this all does. Now this looks complex if you've never seen it before, but actually it's quite easy. So again, line 1 and line 2. We're including the models folder so we can access it. Line 2, whatever whatever is being passed into this index from the store controller, which is this, which really is a list of type genre, reference to this list. That's what this thing is right here. A reference to the list of type genre. And in our controller, it's called genre, lowercase g. Our view bag, which is a container, and we're setting the title to index, right? And here is something new. We're taking the model capital M, and we're getting the count, and we're saying select from how many models we have. For each item in our model, which in this case is a genre, add a list item into the table, into this order list, a list item. So a bunch of links, basically, right? Name, it automatically came up. Because item is actually a genre object, right? It includes name, ID, and all kinds of other stuff that are included inside the genre. And if I look inside my Solution Explorer and I go to my model and I look at genre again, you can see that it has name, description, and so on. IntelliSense is plugging in name. I didn't type name, I just got it from when I typed item. But it pulls up a list of items because item is actually representative of a genre type, right? The name property of type a genre. Whew. Now this is really confusing. If you notice, this is this action link, certain signature, right? The first part is the name of my object. The second part is a string, and if you look at the action link here, the one I've selected is, which is the item name, and the second one is the action name, which is browse. Controller, it's called browse, this one. So actually this item, this action result is calling the browse action. So it's going to go to another page. That's what it's going to do, right? By the way, this exact way is the way you can create your menu if you think about it. This new keyword, if I actually hover over the action link, it tells me I have an object with a bunch of root values. That's what this is. So I'm creating an anonymous object, a value of genre, with item.name, whatever item is .name. For example, it's passing it in as the value of the parameter that I'm passing to the second view, right? That's what's happening, right? Or sorry, the browse view, which is where it's going. Browse view first. And then notice the genre is right here. So it's taking the genre and then listing the genre is empty. It's going to set it to disco anyway, and then it's going to actually return the genre model to the new view, which is the browse view. Lots of stuff going on. We got to fix this problem. But before we do, let's take a short break and let you absorb some of that stuff. I'm talking about models or views today. I'm still talking about controller, right? Like I talked about. I can't stop talking about controller because the controller behind what we do in our view. Okay, we'll come back to this. Let's take a short break.